Hello everybody! Infernape Shinjo here, and wasn't this past year's season of anime great? Now I'm sure right after clicking onto this video, you either agree with me on this, or you've seen better seasons. But this season is especially important to me, because this is the first season of anime that I've kept up with the episodes as they air. So I figured in the spirit of things, I am going to discuss the anime that I watched over this season. Those anime are Laid Back Camp, How to Keep a Mummy, A Place Further Than the Universe, Slow Start, After the Rain, and Dragon Ball Super. I know that Dragon Ball Super wasn't technically this season's anime, more or less it was still going on from before, but I didn't want to make a separate video discussing my thoughts on Dragon Ball Super's ending, because I'm already discussing the Winter 2018 season's ending as well. So I figured to just jumble them both together and make a discussion on all of it. Now, to keep the topic brief, there are a couple of things I'm going to go over before I even delve into the first anime that I watched. The things that I want to mention is, first of all, there is going to be potential spoilers for all of these shows. I'm not going to shy away from mentioning something that happened in the last episode of any of these series, so if you haven't watched any of these in full, then I would recommend to either watch them before continuing this video, or if you don't care about spoilers, you can go on ahead. To aid with this, I'll be posting a timestamp in the description of this video, so if you would rather watch the last entry on this list and don't care about any of the other entries on this list, you can immediately go to that. Next, I'm going to keep my thoughts brief on all of these shows that I discuss, because I'm discussing 6 different anime here, and I don't want this video to be too long. Finally, though I don't mention it in any of the entries on this list, I am absolutely in love with the music in these shows. I just don't want to feel like I'm a broken record when I mention the opening and endings of every single one of these entries on this list. So with all that out of the way, let's get into this video. The first anime that I'm going to be discussing in this video is Laid Back Camp. While I hate to admit it, I think that Laid Back Camp got a little bit shafted from this season because there's so much better anime as far as story-wise and animation-wise as opposed to this, but I absolutely loved this show. Truth be told, I was a little bit hesitant on watching it at first because episode 1 opens up with Rin just going to the campsite, being by her lonesome, but then after she meets Nadeshiko, that's where I begin to get a little interested in it and decide to stick it out for the rest of the episode, and I got hooked. The things that I like about Laid Back Camp are Nadeshiko and Rin's moments throughout the show. Because even though they don't really interact much during the first half of the show, their moments of interaction with each other are just priceless. Nadeshiko's bubbly personality kind of clashes with Rin's personality of always wanting to be by herself, that I just can't help but smile every time that they interact in a scene. The next thing that I like about it, which I actually had to look back on, I think it was around episode 10, when the group was trying to convince Rin to go camping with them, after I realized the series was going to end with all of them going camping together, I looked back on the start of episode 1, because little did I know, it actually foreshadowed this, because the scene opens up with all of the main cast together camping, and Nadeshiko takes a picture of them. Finally, I love just how they wrapped up the series, because I'm not gonna lie to you, when I was watching the final episode and everybody went their own separate ways, and then Rin was going camping and Nadeshiko basically texted her, I was just thinking all along, oh, Rin's going camping, Nadeshiko's going camping, and I was just sitting there thinking, please let them meet up. And they did. I'm really glad that they ended it like that, especially since I think that they ended it the exact same place that Rin and Nadeshiko met at the very start. If they did, that's a nice touch. If they didn't, it's fine either way. The only thing that I didn't like about this show is that they don't really develop the other characters as much as they do with Rin and Nadeshiko. Now, they do give them a bit of a personality, but it's pretty obvious that Rin and Nadeshiko take the front seat in this show, which honestly I'm not that disappointed about because Nadeshiko is an adorable cinnamon roll. Did I just say cinnamon roll? The next anime in this video is How to Keep a Mummy. Now, the basic plot of this show is that Sora's dad is, in a sense, a treasure hunter, and he keeps bringing back these weird artifacts that he finds that basically almost try to kill Sora. But after his dad brings home a mummy that Sora befriends, which sounds weird in a concept, but it actually works in the show, Sora and his friends eventually all find their little pal that they travel around with. Sora gets a mummy, another character gets an Oni, another character gets a Baku, and another one gets a dragon. I can't remember the names right now and I don't want to stop the video to look. But I love this show just because of the concept that it has, and it gives people the opportunity to learn about these mythical creatures. Because I did know some about mummies and dragons and stuff, but I've only heard about Onis and I don't really know about what they were about before the show. In a way similar to Nadeshiko in Laidback Camp, Mi-kun as he's called in the show, absolutely makes the show better. Even though Mi-kun doesn't even speak. From his kind of awkward personality of not knowing what humanity is about and just trying to fit in, and considering that he's basically acting like a child most of the time, it's just so adorable. Another thing that I like is that they do kind of foreshadow poachers going after these mythical creatures in a couple of episodes. I still can't remember his name, but Sora's best friend encounters a dragon when he was way younger that he tries to save from poachers. In a way, they do kind of foreshadow this happening again, but I would have liked it if they would have foreshadowed it a little bit more, just to make the ending of the show that more impactful. The last thing that I like is that they basically kill somebody in a show like this without even showing it. In the final episode, where the poacher gets caught from after stealing Mi-kun, the creatures in the festival take him off into the woods, and they say that he's going to get 100 lashes and burning. So, he's basically dead. Considering that when I went into this show, I was thinking, oh, this is just going to be one of those unassuming shows and nothing scary or dramatic is going to happen. But they basically killed somebody in this show. Granted, they didn't show it, but still, you can fill in the pieces yourself. The two things that I didn't like is that this show doesn't really have an overarching plot, because the first half of the show is introducing the main cast and getting them acquainted with their mythical creatures. I know that a show doesn't have to have an overarching plot always to be enjoyable, but I would have appreciated something like this, especially with the climax that we had at the end. On that note, I would have liked that dramatic climax between Sora and the poacher to be a little bit longer to increase the impact of it, because Sora gets up to the top of the waterfall, confronts the poacher, they fight for a couple of minutes, but then everything's taken care of. Don't get me wrong, I still like this show, obviously I do, because otherwise I wouldn't be talking about it, but those are just my critiques on How to Keep a Mummy. Now here comes the part I can imagine that everybody has been waiting for. What everybody is calling Anime of the Year, a place further than the universe. I can imagine that if you were to ask anybody what their favorite anime from this past season was, they would easily say A Place Further Than the Universe. This show has gotten so much of a following since it's begun, and it really shows. The first thing that I like about this show, which also helps with me explaining what the show is about, is this girl, Kimari, wants to do something big before she realizes that her best years are behind her. after she meets Shirase and finds out that she wants to go to Antarctica, they decide to get a group together and go off on an expedition. Throughout the show, we meet the other two supporting characters, Hinata and I feel so bad that I can't remember the other one's name right now. But what I like about this show is that all of the girls get even developing and they're all given distinctive personalities. You could easily watch one episode of this and you'll be able to tell each of the girls' personalities just from that episode. I like the concept of the show of doing something big before your best years are behind you. From the people's discussions from videos that I have watched, they basically say that they feel like going off to Antarctica or doing something big like this after watching this show. The way that they portray all of the emotion from each character's perspective and the friendship that is born between the girls is so beautiful and so genuine. For some reason, I just love the plot twist of Kimari going home from being in Antarctica and finding out that her friend is in Antarctica now. I think the reason that I like it so much is because of their last encounter before Kimari goes off to Antarctica, and the fact that her friend decides to go off to Antarctica now kind of makes this show get a full circle conclusion. The only thing that I didn't like about this show, and mind you, from a show like this, it was a little bit difficult for me to at least come up with one thing that I didn't like about it. And while it's not really a con on the show's part, it was a little bit difficult for me to remember any of the characters' names outside of the main girls. And of course, you've seen so far in this video that that isn't even helpful because I couldn't remember the fourth girl's name. But I wouldn't really call it a con on the show's part per se, more a con on my part because I'm not good with names. But I'm putting this under a con because I had to put something on here and that's the only thing that I could think of. The next show in this video is Slow Start. Just from watching the opening, you could probably already assume what's going to be happening in this show. And well, you're not too far off. The plot of the show is Hana is going to school after being held back for 1 year from being sick. After she makes friends in this school, she struggles to tell them that she was held back a year. I can't explain why, but I just like that concept for a show. It's a very simple idea of being afraid to tell somebody something that they don't know, but it's effective. It really makes you wonder how that's going to play out through the rest of the show. Another thing that I like is all of the characters bounce off of each other so perfectly. Their personalities just mesh together so greatly that it really feels like they're just old high school friends. Or is it middle school? I can't remember. The last thing that I like is what happens in the last episode of the show. Now granted, the show didn't do what I was hoping it would do in the last episode, but I like how they round everything up with all of them getting teddy bears to symbolize themselves and keeping them at Hannah's house to show that they're still friends and that they'll stay friends for a long time. The things that I didn't like about this show is, like I mentioned previously, I would have liked the ending of this show to be Hana telling her friends that she was held back a year and them not caring about it. Because even in the early parts of the last episode, Hana had a dream that she told her friends that she was held back. Just from how they were showing all of this, it made you think that by the end of this episode, everybody's going to find out that Hana was held back a year. But I suppose that they did it this way so that way they could do a second season of this if the opportunity ever arises. More importantly, at its core, this show is just cute girls doing cute things. There's nothing really groundbreaking about it. There's nothing really abnormal about the show to separate it like a place further than the universe does. But if you like school slice of life anime, this would be the one for you, I would think. The next anime that I'm going to be discussing is After the Rain. Sad to say it, but I think this is the show that a lot of people probably dropped early on, but that's just my thoughts, because the show's plot is basically a 17-year-old girl falls for her 45-year-old boss. Now, of course, with everything going on in the world today, it's pretty apparent that this is a kind of weird plot for a show, but they don't really focus on it that much near the second half of the show. More importantly, the 45-year-old manager, Kondo, is basically a big goofball. He's totally oblivious to everything, which makes it a lot more enjoyable to watch, and more importantly, nothing really happens as far as that relationship goes, in a sense. One thing that I liked about this show is the art style is very distinct from other anime that I've watched. It took me a bit to get used to the character designs when going into the series, but I adapted to it and I'm glad that I did, because this is a very good show. I really appreciate how the rain ties into all of the emotional moments that happen in the show. More importantly, every single show's title has something to do with rain. All the sentimental moments in this show are absolutely spectacular. Like Akira and Haruka's flashbacks near the end of the series. For those of you that haven't watched the series, Akira used to be on the track and field team before she got an injury and couldn't walk anymore. Haruka was her very best friend and was also on the track team. Throughout the show, we learn about Akira being on the track team and everything that happened and all of that, and it all wraps up perfectly with Akira finally deciding to rejoin the track team at the end of the series. At least that's how I interpreted it. Moreover, I just appreciate how Kondo and Akira both kind of complete each other in a way, because if it wasn't for Akira, Kondo wouldn't be going back to writing literature, and if it wasn't for Kondo, Akira probably wouldn't be on the track team. So in a way, that kind of resolves both of their plot lines in a sense, and I just like the idea about somebody else filling in for something that you lack. The only thing that I could find that's wrong with this show is the plot summary. Like I mentioned before, it might drive people away just from the concept of a 17-year-old falling for a 45-year-old manager. I'm not sure if they did this intentionally to drag people into the show to watch it, but that's the only thing that I could find wrong with it. If the show had a different plot, then I would say this show is almost flawless. Now for the moment that everybody has been waiting for. It's time for me to review the very end of the Tournament of Power arc in Dragon Ball Super. Now, I'm not going to go in detail on the last few episodes of this show because I would assume that you all probably watched this. It's been a very big talking point in the anime community as of late. The things I like coming up to the end of the Tournament of Power arc and the last episode of it was the animation. You could tell that they really sprung for the big bucks in the very last episode with the animation that they had. Immediately after I watched the last episode and jumped online to see what other people thought about it, it was pretty clear that 17 was a fan favorite throughout this show. Needless to say, he had very good moments. One that I particularly like was when he blasted Ribrianne and everybody was like, "What are you doing? You should let them transform." The idea of Goku and Frieza teaming up at the very end was something that I would imagine nobody expected, but it was a very enjoyable treat for people that have watched since Dragon Ball Z. And finally, they might have been able to continue a Dragon Ball Super series after this with how they set it up. What I'm talking about is when 17 makes his wish, he says to resurrect all the universes that were erased. And I'm pretty sure I'm not a Dragon Ball Super expert or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure that there were universes that were not in the Tournament of Power because Zeno already erased them. If those universes come back, then there's potential for other adventures. Now we get into the cons. And there are a lot more than every other anime that I've discussed in this video so far. The first thing, which kind of incorporates everything that I'm about to talk about, is it was rushed. It was apparent that it was rushed, at least for me, because they could have done so much better if it didn't feel so rushed with the delivery at the end. They didn't cover a lot of the stuff that I felt was important for the show that I would have liked for them to include. Like, for example, what was Jiren's wish on the Super Dragon Balls going to be? How did Android 17 survive an explosion? Those two off the top of my head, as well as a bunch of other stuff that was just not even mentioned. I would have liked it if they would have went in more detail on stuff like that. The other thing which I feel like a lot of people have already discussed is the wish at the end was super predictable. Even from when the tournament began, I can imagine people were watching this thinking the wish at the end is just going to be to revive the other universes anyway. While that was super predictable, I didn't expect that Android 17 would be the one to make that wish. So, good on you, Dragon Ball Super staff. And the last thing, which is kind of a weird thing unless they're planning that far ahead into the future, at the very end of the tournament, Whis decides, oh, I'm just going to resurrect Frieza now. And it's never really explained how Whis can do that. From what I can understand, Whis is basically a jack of all trades. Whis is basically there if you need something done. While I'm not saying to keep Frieza dead after the Tournament of Power, I would have liked to see Frieza get resurrected by other means besides the Super Dragon Balls. Because now that everybody knows that Whis can resurrect people, it really diminishes the threat of dying in the show. Because we have the Dragon Balls that can resurrect people, and now we have Whis. So basically, there's not as much of a threat with somebody dying. Now, if they decide to never bring up that Whis can resurrect people again, that's another problem entirely. But overall, with Dragon Ball Super, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the ending, even with all the little critiques that I had about it. So there you have it. There is my Winter 2018 discussion, as well as Dragon Ball Super. Even with the critiques that I give to all of these anime, I really enjoyed every single one of them. If I didn't enjoy it, then I would probably just not continue watching it if it was that bad. Let me know if you've watched any of these anime this season, and if you did, what did you think of them? Make sure to leave any topics for me to discuss on Let's Talk Anime down in the comment section, and I will get to them when I have time. I apologize if this video is a little bit longer than usual, but I had 6 shows to talk about here, so I had to cut corners as I could. I'm gonna try my best to make it as short as I possibly can, but if it's still long, I apologize. This is Infernape Shinjo, and I'm signing out. Have an awesome day, everybody.